My FY2021 department goals and accomplishments include updating the drug and alcohol-free workplace policy. This became important because in 2018, medical marijuana was legalized in the state of Oklahoma. When I came on board with the city, I noticed that our drug and alcohol-free workplace policy made no mention of medical marijuana, so it became important for us from a liability standpoint to address this policy. The policy was updated and then implemented in March of 2020. We included the police and fire unions in the process. We're continuing negotiation with one of the unions, but the other union has actually signed on board with this policy as well. Updating the drug and alcohol-free workplace policy created a snowball effect of other needs, the first being updating a safety-sensitive status for our positions. This became a little bit twofold. So the safety-sensitive positions are important to note because if an employee is under the influence of medical marijuana and or tests positive for marijuana, regardless of their medical marijuana license status, it needs to be identified in our policy. It needs to be identified on the job description so that way we can take appropriate action if we need to, if there's a situation where there's a reasonable cause drug test or even a random drug test. We updated the job descriptions for all of our hourly positions across the agency to identify them, A, as being safety sensitive, and B, it had been some time since some of these job descriptions had been updated, so it was just a good time to review and make sure that the job descriptions are still accurate and pertained to what the employee is actually doing. My next administrative goal was finding alternate training resource. The agency used SGR, it was our previous learning management system, but unfortunately their pricing structure changed and it would have meant significant cost increase for the city of Guthrie. In addition to the cost increase, SGR was being significantly underutilized by the city. It became important for me to take a look and see what else was out there and to see if we could maybe get something that would benefit the city. And what I discovered, because the city already partners with OMAG, there is a free resource called Local GovU. It's a learning management system that you can assign work to and learning and online modules. And the best part about it is that there is no cost to the city. And the last administrative accomplishment that I want to discuss is increasing recruitment efforts and reducing turnover. This past year, we have taken a look at some recruiting alternates that we had never tried with the city before. That meant taking a look at some of the online resources that were available to us. One of the biggest returns that we had was actually utilizing Facebook. Facebook was, again, new to us to use as a recruitment tool, and we got some interesting results out of it, and even some that were viable candidates that we've offered positions to. Some other online resources that we've taken a look at include Indeed and governmentjobs.com. Another way that we have accomplished this goal is by partnering with Express. Express is a temporary employment agency. By utilizing Express, they helped us find candidates for the positions that we were looking for. We onboarded these employees through Express. Express maintained their payroll, benefits, etc. Not only were internally recruiting, but Express was also recruiting for us. When they onboarded with Express, we had a 3-month contract through Express, so they remained on Express payroll during that 3 months. And then if they were working out really well, then we would onboard them as a permanent position with the city. That worked out well for us in a couple of ways, but it allowed us to kind of get almost an extended probationary period out of some of these temporary employees, so we could really kind of get an idea of their work habits and if they would be a good fit for the city before we onboarded them on our payroll permanently. When I started with the city, we had 17 open positions at the beginning of FY20. That's been significantly reduced, and we currently have 6. Turnover for calendar year 2019 was 19.7. Whenever I calculated turnover for 2020, projecting out what it might be based on our current turnover projections, we're looking at a 14.5, so turnover's been significantly reduced. Taking a look at our FY2021 goals, the top priority for FY2021 is to develop and implement a new pay metrics for FY2022. The city actually currently has a pay metrics for our non-union employees. However, the pay metrics has not been updated in quite some time, and our practice no longer is in line with that pay metrics. We're realigning our pay metrics so that it makes sense for the way our agency is structured today and what our actual practice is. The next department goal is revising and updating internal and external HR forms. The primary goal behind this is actually just making the forms a little bit more user-friendly by creating like a fillable fields. As I'm looking at the forms and things that we have available right now, I'm learning that there's a lot of information on the forms that we don't necessarily need to collect on that particular form. For example, most of our forms require a social security number when we don't in fact need a social security number to execute what that form is trying to execute. So I really want to make sure that we're protecting personal identifying information of either our applicants or our existing employees, and only capturing that data if we actually need to capture that data. A lot of it is cleaning up some language, specifically for removing PII on forms if we don't need it, and just updating language because some of the language hasn't been updated in a while, and it's a good idea to kind of look at those things every now and then and make sure, again, our practices is aligned with our forms and policies and procedures. The next department goal includes creating and implementing training objectives. So this ties back to one of my FY2020 accomplishments, finding local gov U resource. We need to identify the objectives for each department, and in some cases for each individual, and determine how to utilize that resource best. That's going to be taking a look at agency-wide, what do we want to have as quarterly training, if there are specific department trainings that are needed, that we implement those, and if there are individual trainings that's needed, that we identify a process for getting that type of training assigned out. And then my final 2021 department goal includes implementing an electronic employee filing system. We've already done a little bit of legwork on this and identified a resource that's available. It's just a matter of setting that up and creating a system that makes sense. The primary reason behind this is because there are a lot of paper files at the agency. By implementing an electronic filing system, we can make that information more secure. We can more easily sort through that information. Some of the files, particularly for employees that have been here for a while, are very large, and it's difficult to find specific information if you're looking for information from 20 years ago. And that's particularly important when we're looking at open records requests. Finally, I want to go over the top CIP improvement needs that I'm recommending. The first recommendation that I'd like to make is getting new rooftop units across City Hall. Many of our rooftop units were installed when the building was built in 1996. Most of those rooftop units have been repaired throughout the years. However, they've not been replaced. Over the past year, we've systematically needed to replace several of the units because they've been failing. These units, being as old as they are, they're continuing to fail. My goal here is to identify all the units that have not already been replaced, replace those rooftop units all at once. If we replace those units each individually, then we'll have the cost of the unit plus the cost of labor and plus the cost of a crane every single time that we have an individual unit to be replaced. By replacing all of the units at once, we will be able to realize a little bit of cost savings. For example, you're only paying for the crane one time, and that labor can be utilized a little bit more efficiently, so you're saving on labor as well. My next recommendation is to replace the roof at the Guthrie Public Works Administration building. Last year, during our council retreat, was made one of our strategic goals to renovate the roof at City Hall. During that conversation, it was brought up that there are several roofs across the agency that are also in bad repair and that need to be renovated as well. Doing a little bit more research, what I found was the Guthrie Public Works Administration building is the building that needs the most immediate care or renovation, so that's why I've identified that as one of my improvement needs.